Revenge films.
My name is Jessica, and this is a story about my family. Ever since we were kids, my older sister Karen and I didn't get along. As for the reason behind that, it was because my sister would take my belongings and steal them on a regular basis. And back when we were students, she would always take my clothes that I've bought and then sell them and make that her own pocket change. I was working part-time from when I was a student, but every single time I would get paid, my sister would go into my wallet and she would steal my money from me as well. This was a regular occurrence. Of course, my mother would scold my sister for me, but she would always do it behind my mother's back. That's why, to be honest, I hated my sister. That's why when I went to college, I chose a place far away from my hometown, and I moved out and started living alone. It may sound silly for me to say this about myself, but I was pretty smart, and I had really good grades in school. That's why I was able to get a scholarship to college, and even after that, I didn't have trouble getting a job, and I was able to be blessed with a good company. On the other hand, as for my older sister, she got pregnant early on. She had a shotgun wedding, but for some reason that I was never told, she ended up getting a divorce from her husband right after that. Right now, she was living alone with her child as a single mother, is the last update that I heard from my mom. But I wanted nothing to do with my sister, so I gave my mom some money to give to my sister as my congratulations for having a child. I didn't want to give it to her directly myself, and by that point, I was estranged from my sister for years. And so, a few years after I had been working at my company, I actually decided to start my own business. So with my savings and a small loan that I received from the bank, I moved back to my hometown and I started up my own business. And then, between all of the experience that I had gained until then, and the fact that I was also surrounded by brilliant human resources, soon after I started my own business, things went well. Business continued to grow, and as a company, it was a huge success. I was really busy every day trying to get my business off the ground, so at this point, I still wasn't able to meet any life partners yet. Because I also moved back to the hometown closer to my family home, there would be times that I would run into my sister by coincidence, but I tried to avoid her as much as possible. Just because your company's going a little bit well or whatever, I don't know, but you don't have any attractiveness as a woman and nothing going for you. That's why you don't have any guys around you. Every single time that I would see her, she would say awful things to me like this. I was just before the age of 30, so it wasn't like I was that rushed about getting married or finding a life partner either. So I let my sister's words go in one ear and out the other, and I ignored her. Apparently at this point, my sister's son was in the first grade already, but my mom said that recently my sister had a new boyfriend and she was constantly bringing her son over to the family house, and my mom told me that she was starting to get worried about him and whether my sister was actually taking care of him or not. My mom said that she was suspicious that my sister was putting everything for her child on the back burner and that she was neglecting him in some of his most important years. But I had already decided that I wanted nothing to do with my sister, and I was just listening to my mom tell me about her worries. I didn't know what I could do about the situation as long as I wasn't involved with my sister, and I had pretty much left it. But then one day, out of nowhere, I received a phone call from my mom. She said that my sister had left her son at the family house and went off to go hang out with her boyfriend. Normally this would be fine because my mom would be home, but my mom said that while she was working out in the garden, she pulled her back and she was going to have to stay in the hospital for a couple of days. And so that meant that my nephew was left at home all by himself, and my mom asked if I could look after my nephew at least until my sister would come home. To be honest, I had never met my nephew at that point, and I wasn't that confident about looking after my nephew when he also didn't know who I was. But my sister was gone, and I couldn't get a hold of her at all either. And since my mom was hospitalized with a pulled back, I knew that I was the only person left that could look after him, so I felt like I had no choice but to go and take him in. My mom was somehow able to arrange for my sister's son to come to my place from the hospital, and she gave him money to get in a taxi. This was going to be my first time seeing my nephew. When he showed up at my door, he was very petite, and he seemed like a shy, quiet boy. "Hello, I'm your Aunt Jessica. Did you eat lunch yet today? Are you hungry?" When I asked him that, my nephew quietly replied, "No, I haven't eaten anything." When he said that, I went into the fridge and grabbed whatever I could find, and so I made him an omelet with fried rice and some soup. When I gave that to my nephew, his eyes lit up and started sparkling, and he looked up at me and asked if he was allowed to eat that. I thought it was really strange that a child would ask that when there was food right in front of him, but I told him that he could eat as much as he wanted, and then he immediately started diving into the food. "Oh, you don't have to rush and eat so quickly. I'm not going to take the food from you. It's all yours, so it's okay. You must have been really hungry. Did you not eat anything yet today?" "No,
I didn't eat anything yet today.
Nothing? But what about breakfast this morning? When I asked him that, my nephew slowly shook his head from side to side. Then I thought, surely not, but just in case I decided to ask him about the day before. But then to my shock, my nephew told me that he also hadn't eaten anything yesterday. I was shocked that I couldn't help but ask, "What on earth do you mean by that? You didn't eat anything yesterday either? What about your mom? Doesn't she make food for you to eat?" When I asked him that, I was even more shocked by the words that came out of his mouth.
My mom's never made me food before.
What did you just say? I was so shocked, but I tried to continue asking questions to my nephew, and the more that I learned, the more I realized that my nephew was in the most outrageous situation. To my disbelief, ever since my nephew was born, my sister had never cooked a single meal for him in his life. Even though she would cook for herself and her boyfriend, or they would go out to eat, my nephew would only get prepackaged food that was expired or small slices of bread. And there would be some days that he wouldn't even get that, and that he could go up to 2 days without eating a single meal. He said that it was normal for him to feel hungry. Recently, because he was left with my mom, he was able to eat on those days, but it seems that he was being treated unbelievably poorly by my sister. When I asked my nephew why he didn't say anything to his grandma, my mom, he said that he didn't want to make his grandma worry about him, and also he said that he didn't want to get in trouble with his mom, and that's why he didn't say anything. Well then, what is your mom doing at home all the time?
Nothing, but then she's always just hitting me.
When my nephew said that, I was shocked. I immediately decided to check underneath his clothing, but then I realized that his body was covered in countless cuts and bruises. Even if this was my first time meeting my nephew, this was unforgivable. Even if he wasn't my family, as a child. I could feel an extreme anger boiling inside of me towards my sister. From there, after my nephew was finished eating, I grabbed him and put him in the car. I drove him straight to the hospital, and I had them do a full examination of his scars. Given how many cuts and bruises he had and how much abuse he must have been going through, he was still a young child with a fragile body, and I was worried that there might be some damage to his internal organs. In that case, I thought that it would be a much bigger problem, so I wanted to have him checked. Luckily, according to the doctors, there wasn't any serious damage, but the doctor wrote a full report of all the scars that he found on my nephew. From there, I took my nephew to the shop to buy him new clothes, and I let him buy whatever snacks he wanted at the supermarket. On the way home, I decided to stop by my sister's house in order to pick up my nephew's backpack for school. This was my first time going to my sister's house, but when I walked in, I was at a loss for words at what I saw. When we walked into the house, there were empty cans of beer and bottles everywhere, burnt cigarettes, and so many ashtrays that I couldn't even collect everything. I saw my sister's boyfriend's personal belongings lying all around the apartment. And then when I finally found my nephew's backpack that we had gone there to pick up, it seemed that it had been used as an ashtray for the two of them, and it was covered in cigarette burns and ash. The situation was so unbelievable that I was devastated, and that was when I firmly decided in my heart. After that, I called my sister over and over again, but she didn't answer the phone. I immediately went to buy a new backpack for my nephew, and I also changed all of his stationery into new items. And I brought him back to my house with me to go to school from my house. When my nephew saw his brand new backpack, he seemed super happy as he headed off to school that morning. And then that day, just as I had predicted, my sister and her boyfriend were arrested by the police. That's because the night before I took my nephew and I had gone straight to child care services in the police department to file a report on my sister. I showed the current situation of my nephew and all of the scars on his body. When my sister and her boyfriend came home that day, I asked the police to make their move, and they were arrested on charges of child abuse and neglect. As it turns out, the child support that my sister was receiving, she considered as extra income for her to have fun with. So she had gone on a 2-day vacation with her boyfriend. When I received the phone call from the police station, I went to meet them at my sister's place. When my sister was arrested and she saw me, she glared at me and started screaming.
Are you kidding me? What the hell is going on here? Why the hell should we have to get arrested? Hurry up and give me back my son. I am going to make him tell the truth that all of this is a lie.
She was yelling at me, so I calmly replied to her, "Sorry, but there's no way in hell that I am ever going to be handing that child over to you. And first of all, both of you are going to be behind bars, so I'm sure there's no way that you're ever going to be able to live with him again." I went to the hospital and I had them write a full report on my nephew's scars, and the police have also done an investigation in your house, so there is a mountain of evidence that you were abusing your son.
This has nothing to do with me! Let go of me, you witch! How dare you!
What do you mean this has nothing to do with you? I heard about everything from my nephew, and how dare the two of you grown adults treat such a young child like that and put him through so much hell? This time, it's your turn to go to hell, so I hope you're both prepared. When I said that to the two of them, my sister and her boyfriend were kicking and screaming, but there was no way I was ever going to forgive them. After that, when I spoke to my mom about my nephew, she said that my sister got what she deserved, and she was crying, wishing that she had noticed earlier and was able to do something for her grandson sooner. After that, my sister and her boyfriend were taken to court, and of course they were given a full prison sentence. But of course, that would be the case. I used all of the connections that I had, and I hired the strongest lawyer I could find to take them down in every single way I possibly could. From there, my mother and I worked together to raise my nephew. I officially adopted him, and now I'm raising him as my son. Otherwise, there was a possibility that after my sister served her prison sentence, she would be able to reclaim her son and hurt him again. After a short time in the hospital, my mom was able to move again, and my nephew also became healthy like a normal boy. He was finally able to put weight on again, and his health was steady. Hey, I'm going to be your mom from now on. Would that be okay with you? When I asked him that, he had a big smile on his face as he nodded yes. And with that alone, my heart was full. I wasn't married yet, and I never could have imagined that I was going to have a child, but I really am glad that I was able to save my son from those two devils. I'm sure that years of hell were waiting for those two, but they are simply getting what they deserve.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.